Hi guys, this is the Deafness article for Grinder School. Today we're going to be recording a two-tabling video of 50NL Zoom, just live play, so without further ado, we'll get to the action. Those of you who have seen some of my videos in the past will likely know a lot of the basics of what I do, so I'm going to be trying to avoid going to try to avoid explaining very simple stuff. Here we check the turn because it's the sort of turn which hits his range much harder than ours. You should be checking back a lot of ace high on this board, so it's a good spot for him to bet turns, and obviously then we're not planning to fold, though it's probably a bit thin to check raise. When he leads the king turn here, it's a sort of spot we have to peel one. Certainly because we have 5 outs against even most of the stronger parts of his range, but I don't think we can call the river, especially considering we have some flush draws with which we call the turn. This flops fairly close between a bet and a check back. I don't really have any detailed reads on what he's flashing from the blinds. We only have about 300 hands, so it's going to be tough anyway. So we elect to check back. Obviously, we're not folding the turn. Here we want to get stacks in by the river. I think $2 on a flop is likely enough to do that, and we don't really expect to fold any ace at any stage anyway, really. Considering we've checked back some king x, and some jack x, queens, tens on the flops, we can just fold this river without worrying about either being exploited or thinking that we're missing a chance to make an exploitative play, really, against most of the population. We're just looking to check down ace jack against a likely fish. We're going to see behind sometimes, but it's just not really worth it. It's just not really worth turning our hand into a bluff, considering we have a lot of worse hands, and B, we're not sure we can expect him to fold a pair anyway. Blind versus blind, range is wide enough that we probably have to peel this flop. We can probably fold 2s and 3s because we have some better hands, and we just fold the turn. And we're taking a note on the fact that he min-raised to small blind because it's unusual sizing, to say the least. Here, obviously, we're raising ace king. Normally I'd make that 250, but because the fish is a short stack, we make it slightly smaller. And when he donks pot, we're taking a note and folding, even though we have a gut shot and an overcard. Here we're just looking to get stacks in, so we bet the smallest amount that's gets stacks in by the river. It's such a dry board that we don't really need to be concerned about him hitting draws, and really we want to make it as lucrative as possible for him to call with queen high or whatever he wants to call with. With a fish in the pot, 5-7 suited is probably a profitable call, and it's a good spot to donk the flop. We're going to squeeze ace jack here because it doesn't play that well three-way. And both these guys look like fish. We don't mind getting heads up with either of them, though we're not certain about that either's a fish. And we're likely going to see bet this flop, just because we fold out a significant amount of equity. Although we don't really expect him to fold better that often, he's often going to I think he's going to be folding a significant amount anyway, and that means that betting is likely more profitable than checking back, which is going to be likely marginal at best. Ace 10 is close between a 3 bet and and a call. We elect not to 3-bet because there's been a culture of fish limp jamming under the gun recently, so we want to slightly adjust our strategy to account for that. And obviously there's no reason to do anything but check call the flop. We expect him to have a weaker than average range for his flop bet because he bet half pots, and we expect him to use exploitable sizing. Turns close. We're probably calling turn and planning to fold some rivers. This one being one of them, if he bets, and we will fold because simply we don't expect him to triple barrel very often. We don't realistically beat anything he's betting for value. So we're behind a significant amount of his range. Queen 9 suited is almost certainly a fold. Against the fish, we don't really need to be concerned about protecting our checking range, so we can just go for value with our 9 on the flop. Sometimes he has a 10 obviously, but there are so many draws that we can get value from, considering he's likely calling the flop with any gut shot and sometimes with bare overs. Ten 8 suited should be a standard call on a button in that spot. Unless you have absolute maniac squeezes in the blinds, but we simply don't here. We can actually fold this flop, A, because we expect him with that sizing to mostly have a strong range, and also from a balance perspective, when you're in multi-way pots, you share the defense responsibility. So in essence, let's say he bets pot because it makes maths easier. Between the 3 other people, we need to defend a total of a 50% range, and so that means we can each fold upwards of 80% of the time, assuming we share it equally, which isn't always the case, because in some spots some ranges are going to be stronger than others. Here, against an under-the-gun raise, we could just check fold his flop, because we don't expect him to be betting lower pairs very often. They're just checkbacks. Even against a min bet, we're just going to fold complete trash on the flop. Here with top 2, we really have to raise this texture. Obviously, it's quite a wet board, and also this guy's c-betting too much over a small sample. But even across a bigger sample, we expect him to continue c-betting too much. Here, villain isn't 3-betting that much, but we expect him to still have some bluffs in his range, and 10 is just too high in our range to fold for 3 bets. On the turn here, value betting would be a little thin, and it's also nice to have some non-flush draw hands to call rivers with. We do plan to call rivers, but we don't always expect to be ahead when we do. And here, obviously, we have to call the flop. On this turn, it's close because some villains are going to start checking aces through jacks without a club here. So I don't think we can value bets. Here on the river, I mean, it's tough, but I think we probably have to call against the sizing, considering we're going to value bet our set some of the time on a turn. Though we don't expect the population to bluff the sizing as often as they should, we still expect them to have some bluffs in their range. And also, we block some of the hands he may have misplayed and now be value betting, like sets. Whereas if he has one pair of hands, he's not going to turn those into a bluff very often, because we can realistically still be checking back the turn with draws, etc. We expect fish to fold his flop too often so we can c-bet. Although it's probably a c-bet against the reg as well. And on this turn with absolute air, we're just shutting down. Normally, I'd consider taking a note here because it's an interesting line, but to be honest, it's just a spot I don't expect to come up often enough for me to be able to derive anything useful from knowing that he's done that once. Sometimes I'd be tempted to raise here, but I've seen fish take this line too often with nutted hands to do so, and also we have some decent showdown value already. Against the reg here, he seems to be folding a little bit too much to c-bets over a small sample, but it's just not quite enough for this to be a bet. We're just going to check what he had. Okay, villain had king queen there. So the note we're going to take is that he min 3 bets king queen off versus MP, and also that he min bet bluffs. I think note taking is something that's useful even on fish, just because the small amount of time it takes can make a reasonable difference to your win rate against individual opponents. So taking good notes completely can probably add about 2 big blinds per 100 hands to your win rate. Possibly not quite that much, but something like that anyway. Here we're going to squeeze. It's pretty much just a decent hand to squeeze. We're betting this texture fairly large with our whole betting range. And we have hands with blockers that we'd like to see flopped with fish heads up. I think we have to float the flop check raise given positions. I think this plays better as a check back on the flop, because sometimes this guy is going to have a fairly strong range some of the time, and also we can get stacks in by the river anyway. When villain checks a turn, we're going to bet this hand and check back some others. Although stronger villains will check their sets on the turn because it's just generally a useful thing for them to do, I think as a whole with population it isn't protecting their checking range in that kind of spot enough. We can't really value raise at any point here, just in case he's doing something silly with a weak hand. I mean the river's pretty close, but it's not quite a raise. And again we're going to make a note that he bluffs small. When a 10-10 guy opens, we can just fold king queen, even with the semi-fish in the pots, because king queen obviously doesn't play that well three-way. We can consider squeezing, but we expect the nit to defend too often, or more often than he needs to, which sucks the profitability out of squeezing. This is a pretty decent hand to 3 bets, so because there's nothing to suggest this guy's not reggish yet, we're going to. This c-bet's pretty large, but I don't think we can fold just yet. Though we are going to be a little bit wary and weight his range a little bit more towards stronger hands here. And because of this, we can probably fold the turn. We open here because over a small sample he's folding 92% of steals, but obviously we're folding some 3-bet, and as I mentioned, we can just fold this turn. I'm going to make a note questioning that he might bet larger when he's strong on a dry board, but as you can see, I'm adding indications to myself that I'm not certain about this, and I'll remove those as I get more evidence. Just change this guy's tag to a bad reg because there's several leaks in his stats. 95% C-bet, 11% 43-bet, 23% steal. With somebody who looks weak in the big blind, we can open a Queen 2 off on a button. Though he doesn't look like a massive fish, we expect him to make a lot of mistakes anyway, and that's enough to make opening a marginal hand profitable on the button. I'm not sure if when this comes out, my podcast on poker books will have come out, but either way, if it has come out, you should listen to it. If not, you should probably wait until it comes out and then listen to it. I think it's a topic that's undercovered in in basically all poker study material. There's so much that books can do for you. We expect him to have some ace-x when he checks back the flop, but not enough to justify checking the turn. And here we're likely checking down. I think we can probably bet the river because we don't expect him to ever check king queen on the turn or check ace-x on the river. So we're just looking for some random calls from whatever he wants to call with. Jack ace. Is that a pair? Nope, jack high. Okay, that's an extremely loose call because he should still have some queen x there. But yeah, with a fish and a small blind and this in the big, we can open this despite the aggressive 3-better to our left. It's just about in my standard opening range anyway. This guy, and I've never seen this guy not open 6x as a standard from all positions before, so it's quite worrying this has changed. Certainly, it removes some value from the games if that's the case. Yeah, poker books. So the general points I talk about are why we use poker books, how to read them, why I believe that basically every poker book is useful, and finally, I give some recommendations of books. I mean, here we don't expect him to really ever have anything strong when he checks back the turn, and we don't really have many bluffs here, so we're betting fairly small, just to entice a call from whatever. Check folding this flop should be standard. I mentioned about shared defense responsibility earlier, and the same thing applies here. So we can probably check call like king jack suited, possibly queens through jacks, and I'm not sure we need to defend much wider than that at all. Because the blinds are folding lots of steals, we can open king 9 off from the cutoff and expect it to be profitable. It's pretty marginal with standard blinds, but with this particular table, it becomes pretty profitable. Yeah. So I'm still I'd still like to hear what you want to see from me, and if I haven't posted by the time this video comes out, I'll certainly be posting it in the near future. I'm about to launch a coaching ad in the grammar school forums. As at the moment, my rate is $25 an hour. Um, we can just fold this from the cutoff. It's close, and the fact that we're deep makes us want to call a little bit more, but it's not quite enough, and it's reasonably low down within our range. Though it's on the borderline, ace 10 suited is probably a call. With backdoor diamonds and 2 overs, we can see about this. Yeah, as I was saying, I'm about to launch coaching adverts, basics, $25 an hour, and the coaching is basically what you want it to be. But we're borrowing some ace-x, some 6x, probably not ace-x, we check the flop of those, but we're borrowing some 6x diamonds, etc. here. But in general, I try and focus on giving students a framework to become better than me, rather than simply teaching them some tricks that will help them become as good as me. Because fundamentally, it's all well and good to play 50 NL, but ultimately, I know that certainly some of you will have aspirations of crushing 1k NL, and thus my coaching is largely grounded in the game theoretic aspects. As well as deviations from, as well as exploitative deviations from that, and how to identify them. So one of the main things I focus on is how to think about your own range in the spots. Certainly because it's one of the more useful things to be able to do. It sets apart the big winners at the upper micro stakes at the moment from those who break even or just about scrape by. We can probably rebet this here. We're 3-betting depolarized in this spot as a standard. I'm guessing 5-1. We're not folding jack 10. 6-5 ceases on the borderline of whether we want to fold or not. He seems to be folding a reasonable amount to see bets. It's a good flop to see bet. We have backdoor diamonds and some odd backdoor straight draws, so it's a decent spot to see bet. I don't expect people to be bluffing this flop multi-way often enough, so I think we can fold this. I'm not sure whether it's a call from a balance perspective, whether it's high enough in our range, but certainly the fact that we have the jack of diamonds blocker removes some of his potential bluffs from his range, so it makes us less inclined to call there. We don't expect him to open limp ace-x often, so we can lead this flop for value. Expect calls from a lot of gut shots, a lot of king high, backdoor spades, whatever. Against the fish, this is a check and hope to check to showdown because we still can't really get value from anything. The river's a bit of a funky spot. I can't really see what he has because King X or Queen X should bet the flop most of the time. he min bets a turn, which is usually an indication of weakness. So maybe he's played ace in some goofy way. But yeah, a lot of the time we're going to be ahead. Here we're going to float this flop because we expect small donks to mostly be weak. And we have enough equity to potentially take the pot away on future streets. Queen Jack suited is a standard flat out position there. And it's a spot where we check turn bet river, I think. We're going to peel again here because we expect him to give up on a bunch of rivers. And because he doesn't seem like a complete retard, we're going to bluff raise this river. Sometimes he thinks sometimes he's doing some silly induced play. Sometimes he's making cheap bluff. Sometimes he's going to bet fold 10x small. Sometimes he's going to bet call 10x. But in general, I think we're going to get enough folds, considering we need him to fold about 40% of the time to justify it. Considering we have basically the nut low here. We don't really have any lower parts of our range. And okay, he has jacks. I mean, it's pretty borderline, but I don't think we can go too far wrong. King 2 off is probably a fold again against a 3x and small blind. Again against a 2.5x, we can call it. And obviously we're not folding bottom pair on the flop. We'd probably peel king high as well. When he borrows a turn, it's close. We're just about low enough our range that we can fold. We don't really have any population reads, I should say, that could enable us to exploitatively call too loose or fold too often. So we're just defaulting to roughly unexploitable play in that spot. Because it's essentially when we take an unbalanced line there, we risk getting exploited ourselves, and if our opponent is unbalanced and calling unexploitably exploits him sort of inadvertently. Because this guy's a fish, we're going to 3-bet us to isolate. In general, I'd much rather, this is the type of hand that I'd like to 3-bet to isolate because it doesn't really play well in multi-way pots. I mean, we can see bet as flop fairly small against 2 fish because we expect them to have nothing most of the time and not really to be paying attention to our bet size. Though in theory, it's probably a check back. We just gain too much from a 40% pot bet, folding out what's often 4 cards to beat us to not bet there. Turn to check here. We probably bet ace-x, and we can consider value betting rivers. When he pots a turn, he can have some ace-x, possibly pocket 7s. The river's definitely a close one. We're gonna bet the river if the turn checks through here. Just small to induce calls. I don't think most regs are capable of betting large 2 streets for value here unless they've got pocket 7s, so we're going to call, but okay, that's fine. I think he played the hand fine on the condition that he also does that with some other ace-x and bluffs. I don't know. I think the river could be a fold. I'm not sure what our population assumptions are there, but people often go batshit against the cap's range, so I don't think the fold can be bad. Certainly it's, a call can be bad rather. Certainly it's high enough in our range that we should be calling when we check the turn, considering we're betting most ace-x. But again, I'm not sure what our population assumption should be. I'm tempted to retain the population assumption that I have for lower micro stakes, that big bets are nutted, even from regs. Though that's certainly less the case at 25 NL, and I haven't really seen enough evidence at 50 NL yet to draw a conclusion. We're barreling an overcard against a fish. And here, I don't really see the point in triple barreling. We beat his draws, and I don't think he's folding a 9. Obviously, he's not folding a 6 or a jack. This this is possibly a little bit loose, but I think it's probably fine. When he bets a turn small, and we had a flush draw, the plan is to call turns and raise a lot of rivers. That's not a river we're going to raise, but we are betting it fairly small when checks too. Just because, you know, he's not folding ace-x whatever we bet. So, but we do have the nut low, and we do want to value bet ace-x ourselves for roughly this size, and that's certainly the biggest part of our range. Okay, possibly, I think that's a really bad call in this spot. Yeah, I'd say that's a significant mistake. Firstly, betting the turn. I'm actually going to take a note on that. C betting's pretty bad in the first place. I prefer not to have a donking range at all on any texture, big blind versus button, but that's certainly a texture that you might consider having a donking range on if you were to develop one. When it checks back, it's just a texture that we want to bet fairly big on turn river with our entire betting range. Yeah. This is pretty close between a bet and a check. I think it probably plays better as a check. We're vulnerable to overcards, and that's the reason for betting, because we can still get called by worse a little bit. But the issue is we do want some hands in our checking range that we can call down on low runouts. And I think this is just about high enough on our range that we should be calling the flop here, though. Obviously, three-way. We expect to be check folding a bunch of turns, especially this turn, because we expect flush draws to bet in his spot and check call in his spot. So both of them still have all their flush draws, and we're just checking it down now. We don't expect him to check the river with a flush or better ever, really. Okay, that's fairly reasonable. Against a fish, we're just getting money in here. This river's a little bit awkward. It's sort of a river that we're going to struggle to get a third street on. Especially with the Ace of Clubs blocker. Wait, I think that's probably better for us to have it. Because we block some of his draws. His value hands mostly raise a flop if they're 2 pair plus, so we just want him. Okay, we just really want him to call when he's deciding to call with whatever he wants to call with. But I think that's a fairly standard river shove. I'm going to take a look at it later actually, because. And I'd recommend that whenever you feel a little bit uncomfortable within a hand, you go through. Sorry. Whenever you feel a little bit uncomfortable in the hand, you tag it and go through it later. It's interesting he barrels that card because it's pretty bad for his range. I think we should probably peel it once more, but it starts getting a bit close. I think we can fold this river. We blocked some of his bluffs with the Ace of Spades, and we have like jacks, tens, 9s, 8s we can call with. Oh dear. I think we're too high up in our range to fold the river, but well, again we're a little bit uncomfortable against his sizing, and yeah, okay. And with that note, we're likely to assume he's unbalanced in those spots, which means we can fold more often than usual when he pots, and possibly raise more than usual when he bets smaller. Here we're just betting 3 streets of value. He's caps, and we don't really expect him to check better often. I think we can value bet this river because we expect him to 3 bets ace king, ace queen pre. We don't expect him to bet most of his combos, which now make 2 pair earlier on. King queen bets at some stage, obviously. So there's like ace 7 through ace 3 which you can call, and he rarely has better. With a fish in the pot, we're just going to bet fairly big, a reasonable size of value here. Probably looking for 3 streets from the fish. This is a problem, of course, with recording a 2-tabling video. Of course, you often get some quieter spots, and there's nothing really to say in them. This is a nice one to bet flop check turn with. It's strong enough to value bet the flop, but it's not one we get 3 streets from. We want some hands in our turn checking back range, which can easily call rivers. So yeah, I think that's a pretty decent way to construct our range and check back the weak race X on a flop. Even if villain weren't 3-betting very often, again as a re-steal, that's a fuss. And I think betting here would be a pretty significant mistake. It's nice to have some flush draws in our checking back range, and also we don't get any value from worse as played. But obviously when we turn nuts, we're betting turn river for value. The river's fairly close on as to what sizing we should use. Part of my inside wants to say overbet for all you're worth, but I think just a largish bets will work better, because I think people are likely folding a little bit, are likely correctly assuming that overbets at this limit are value heavy. And we're snap calling a jam because he simply isn't checking 2 pair or better on a turn, which he needs to have better than is on the river here. Threes is pretty marginal there. We'd almost rather have king high in our flop check calling range, and we're just folding the turn when he barrels. We don't really get any value on this board, so checking back is fine. And obviously, ace-2 suited is a really good candidate to 3-bet there as a bluff. When he pots the river, we can just fold. We expect fish in particular to be very value heavy with that sizing. And again, we can 3-bet this to isolate. It's not quite the usual hand type I use, but I'm getting called a lot today, but we're happy about that when we have king-9 suited and some of the other hands. And again, on a paired board, we can just c-bet small against 2 fish and print money. Coincidentally, against a reg, this would be a fairly good sizing to use with your whole range on this board. It's just a good spot for it. It's close between betting that and checking that, but obviously after checking it, we're calling turn river. Here we can have some floats on the turn, and people are still used to this limit to seeing, when I have queens or whatever here, seeing smaller bets. So the hope is he's going to level himself into a call there. I've played a lot with this guy at deep ante, so his stats aren't that unusual, but I still don't think he's very good. And well, I'm 3-betting depolarized in that spot, so I think ace-8 suited is fairly decent to include as a part of that, though. We do get post-flop a lot, so considering he's only folding 30% to c-bets. And again, with 3-betting this to sort of bluff, sort of isolate. The only result here we mind with king 10 off is a 4-bet, which we're not very happy with. and we can either c-bet or check call his flop. I think it plays better as a c-bet with the king of spades. It just adds so much equity to our betting range, to using it as a bet rather. So much expected value rather. And again, I should note, don't be surprised if you see yourself with incredibly exploitable stats over short sessions. You should note here that I have a fairly significant gap between flop c-bet and turn c-bets. That's certainly not standard for me. We're going to make this a bit smaller with the guy who can shove on us. I mean, we have to call it off against him, but simply no point in betting at any stage here. And when he pots river, I mean, it can be a reasonable play with some of his range against 3 checks, but he's got less than full stack. His Russian, his name's types in capitals. With and this in the cut-off and sort of semi-fish and the on a button in the big blind, we can open queen jack off from middle position. Yeah, this is kind of frustrating. I feel like I'm not providing value to you guys for your oh, that's really bad. That actually hasn't happened before. This is normally a very reliable connection. If I don't manage to get back up soon, we'll just call this the end of the video. We're a reasonable amount of time in, so it should be okay, but really that's rather a frustrating way to end a session. Fortunately, that wasn't aces or anything. I'm just going to pause the video here and see if I get anything sorted out. If I don't, I'll just end it here, so I'll do an interim finish here. Thank you. This has been the Definite Article for Grinder School. Good luck at the tables, and goodbye.